morning, guys, and thank you so much for tuning into our Monday movie memo, where we like to talk about what happened over the weekend and oftentimes look ahead to what will be the big story of the week. And for today, we are focusing on Divergent, which came out last Friday and led the box office with, I guess you'd say, a healthy $56 million. It is, it's not Twilight or Hunger Games type money. Those adaptations that were based on young adult books, I guess what would qualify as young adult books at this point, they usually topped over 100 million. The first Twilight got off to a slower start. I think it opened in the 60s or 70s. So Divergent's kind of on track with that, and I think that the studios are hoping that it, establishes a fan base and then continues to grow as they get into other sequels like Insurgent, if they're able to make that. And opening at 56 million makes me think that they're going to continue ahead with this franchise. I think that's a big enough start to prove that there's definitely a fan base here. The question that I keep getting or that I got a lot over the course of the weekend and leading up to the release of Divergent is, can my kids watch this? Now, I'm the parent on Cinema Blend. I'm the one who has kids. I'm the one who has to address this question often. I have a 10-year-old son and a 6-year-old son, and a long time ago we started drifting away from the animated films that everybody grows up on and started looking for, live action films that we can actually watch, because you can only watch the Pixar catalog so many times before your brain starts to melt and actually run like right out of your ears, and you start to look for new options. And we're always scanning, old titles to see, what we think our kids can handle, what's appropriate for them. We probably put way too much focus on this than my parents ever did, where I think I was allowed to watch pretty much anything, but we try and scan things like, the Goonies and Gremlins and Ghostbusters and the Indiana Jones series, which my youngest was a huge fan of for the longest time, and of course the Star Wars movies, and we're always looking for new things that we can watch. And so when you get to a film that comes to theaters, where your kids are seeing all these different trailers and these commercials, and they're really intrigued by what they think that they can, what they want to see, what they're excited to see, what they think that they can handle, a lot of these titles fall into this sort of gray area. Like, it's PG-13, it's based on a young adult book, but, how much of it is appropriate? Is it too violent? Is it, the theme's going to be over your kids' heads? So we want to start talking about different titles like this on Cinema Blend, because we're getting into, the Marvel movies are coming up. Captain America, the Winter Soldier is going to be one of these titles that I think parents want to know if, hey, my kids have watched some of the Marvel movies leading up to it, can they handle this? And I think Divergent's one of those perfect movies that fits right in the middle of this sort of gray area between anyone can see it and this area of they wanted to make it soft enough that, the young adult audience that it's aimed at can really fit into it. And right off the bat, you always want to talk about in a conversation like this that every parent is going to be completely different, and what one parent thinks is wildly appropriate, and then my kids can see anything. There's going to be the parent at the other end of that range that feels that they have to be really protective, and I get that. So of course it's going to be your decision. I'm going to try and throw out enough information that everybody can sort of process what I'm telling you and make their own decision. But just know that, obviously, every parent's going to approach it a different way. And the thing about Divergent too, and the thing about any of these sort of young adult adaptations is, I always feel like if the kids have gone ahead and read the book, then it's a different story, because they've already sort of visualized it in their head, and they know what's coming. And that was a really big topic when we were talking about the Hunger Games movies, because, the concept of the Hunger Games is, obviously, these kids are being thrown into an arena and being ordered to fight to the death. Not the cheeriest concept to ever start, a quote-unquote family movie, but the way that they handled those, they really did approach it knowing that they had to go after a sort of teenage demographic, or they wanted parents to maybe come with their kids. But of course, I always like to say that if your kids have gone ahead to sort of read the book, that they're way more prepared for what they're going to get on screen. And so if your kids have read Divergent, I think that you can be a little bit more lenient about, like, hey, what's going to happen in here. That being said, Neil Berger, the director, did a really good job, I think, of walking that difficult tightrope between, we want to make this serious enough because it takes place in an apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic world where, interesting questions are being asked about society, but they also want it to be accessible to kids who are going to, buy the tickets and pay the money up front and lead to these $56 million opening weekends and become successful. The language in Divergent is pretty soft. Like, there aren't any questionable moments where, excessive amounts of language are used, and I know language is really a hot button topic for a lot of parents. The violence is actually pretty tame too. For people who don't know, it's set in this world where in the decrepit city of Chicago, following a war that we don't get to see, society is now dividing themselves up into different factions. And you take a test to determine what faction you're going to belong to. And our main character, played by Shailene Woodley, her name is Triss, and she learns that she is divergent, which means she doesn't fit comfortably into any one faction. And when you watch it, you realize that it's really this giant symbolic discussion of what I viewed as, you know, first day of high school, where you're coming into school, you're trying to figure out what clique you fit into. Are you the athletes? Are you the nerds? Are you the cool kids? Where do you fit? And Triss is one of these kids who, you know, feels comfortable in almost every different group. But in the world of Divergent, that makes her very dangerous because, you know, post-apocalyptic futures, you have to be very dangerous. But I think that sort of question of where do I fit in and what is my personality, what is my identity, that's really going to speak to the target demographic of Divergent, because it appeals to kids who probably are asking a lot of these same questions of themselves. Like they're in a new school setting, or their friends who they've grown up with are moving into different circles, and they want to know, like, do I keep going with this group? Do I fit in with this group? Where do I belong? Now, they up the stakes, obviously. They make it a little, they have some sci-fi elements to it, and they have these futuristic elements to it, and the end of it, the violence at the end of it does get a little bit more excessive, but never extreme. You know, it becomes Star Warsy in the fact that Triss has to sort of take the battle to the faction that is causing all the problems, and I don't want to get into spoilers, but, you know, it becomes sort of the shootouts and the violence, and she loses two of her parents, and these are important plot points, but they're things that I think your kids can handle if they've made it this far. But those themes of fitting in, those themes of looking for the people that make you feel comfortable, of determining what your voice is going to be, what your identity is going to be, where do you fit in, what direction should you go, these are great questions that are asked by Divergent. And they're questions that are sometimes asked by these other young adult adaptations. Harry Potter, you know, asks that question a lot. Harry's always wrestling with, can I just be normal, or do I have to rise to the challenge of this hero that's been my birthright? And I think Triss is going to follow that discussion and get into a lot of those discussions. I think, anyway. I haven't read Insurgent, and I don't know the direction that this franchise is going to go. But as I said in my review on the site, this is one of the first young adult adaptations that when I got to the end of Divergent, I actually wanted to know where it was going to go. I was fascinated to see what direction it was going to go. I have a 10-year-old son. He wasn't that interested in Divergent. He didn't show any real interest for it. The funny thing is, he's just now getting into the Hunger Games. He's interested to watch the movies. He's reading the first book, and he's plowing through it. I think once he finishes, we're going to pull the Hunger Games off the shelf and probably watch the first one at least, to, you know, get his feet wet in what is now the trend of young adult adaptations, which has to take place in a dangerous future. The main person has to be in danger and has to, you know, save society or save the world. I also think we're going to sample Ender's Game because I thought that was a really smart adaptation of complicated source material. He's probably a little bit too young for Divergent. I don't know if it would hold his interest. The problem is the length also of Divergent. It's 2.5 hours long. And unless your kid, boy or girl, is invested in this world, or maybe comes with a pre-exposed or predestined interest in the story that's being told, I'm not quite sure that the build-up that Triss has to go through in order to get into the Dauntless faction, which is the one that she's lobbying to get into, I'm not sure if they're going to follow the entirety of that journey. But I'll leave it up to one of my oldest son's closest friends, a girl who lives across the street, who is 12, and she's seen Divergent twice since it's opened. Now, it's Monday. It opened on Friday. She saw it once with her parents, and then she went back and saw it again with her best friends, and she told me on Sunday that it was the best movie that has ever been made. So, it's working really well for the target demographic. I think that 12 is probably right at that perfect age range. Maybe younger if your kids have read the book. Again, I really do believe if they've read the book, they've visualized this world already. And Divergent sticks really close to, I think, the the images that the author, Veronica Roth, wanted to get into her book and onto the pages, and I think they did a really good job of bringing it to the big screen. So, parents, I think you're safe if your kids are around that 11, 12 range, especially if they read the book. It's going to really appeal to kids who are in that 12 to 13, 14 range and a little bit older, because I think it speaks a lot to what they're going through on a social level in their own contemporary society. And I hope that this helps a little bit. If you have specific questions about any sort of film that's in theaters right now and you want a parent's perspective, please feel free to just reach out to me. I'd be happy to sort of answer any of your questions. I do try to watch a lot of these movies from a parental point of view, and I'm going to start bringing these opinions to Cinema Blend in the weeks and months coming up. So if there's a title that you want us to touch on, please let me know. And thank you so much, of course, for tuning in to the Monday Movie Memo.